I'm curious. What say you, the jury? You know, I don't do that whole guilty or innocent thing online. No. You have to keep an open mind about things. When you're presented with new evidence, you have to change maybe some of your old systems and beliefs that will fit in the new evidence that you've been presented and given. So, I wanted to make some critical observations. Not all of the observations that I've made thus far, you will agree with or want to even validate. And this is by no means a complete, exhaustive list of all the critical observations I've made thus far. But this is in regards to, the Rottenhouse trial, a.k.a. Rittenhouse. You know, the dude that, traveled from Antioch, Illinois to Kenosha, Wisconsin to murder two individuals and wound a third individual. Anyway, here goes some of the observations that I made thus far. You know, one observation I made, listening to a number of the testimony, looking at video footage, hearing the witnesses, one early observation that I made is, this whole notion that, the Black Lives Matter protests last year, and some this year, that they're inherently, chaotic. They're inherently unpeaceful. They're inherently violent. You know, that's not what the testimony is revealing. That's actually the exact opposite of what the testimony is stating. You see, thus far we've learned that, a garbage can was pulled onto a street and there was a small fire lit in the garbage can. And somebody quickly came along and, extinguished the fire in the garbage can on the street. We've heard about cars being damaged in a car lot. We've heard about, people possibly wanting to, set fire to a church building. But this is kind of par for the course, and far worse during, a college football victory or loss by, any urban major football team. I mean, look at all the riots that, have happened in Columbus, Ohio, when Ohio State has won or lost the football game. I'm talking about property destruction far worse than, what was even reported in Kenosha. You don't generally have armed people go to, Columbus, Ohio to protect property from, college football hooligans and vandals, looters and rioters. So, what was the whole purpose of having, private citizens travel from a place they didn't live to another location to, guard property? I mean, that got answered sort of kind of in the trial. The prosecution asked, Ryan Bulge, why did you come to Kenosha? How did you hear about what was happening in Kenosha? And basically, his entire answer was, based off of a Facebook post and a Facebook ad. And I don't know about you, but do you travel to, another location because of, something you read on Facebook? Kind of odd and strange. So, that was one thing that didn't make a whole lot of sense. The whole, why were you there? The intention with you know, they couldn't really explain that whole intention. He asked about intention, and they said, well, their intention was, well, to be an intimidation for people who might possibly want to do looting and damage. Now wait a minute. I thought that's where you have, well, a police force. You say you don't want to defund the police, but well, in addition to not wanting to, well, defund them, you want to not allow them to do their job either, I guess, because you need additional people who aren't law enforcement officers to guard property. You gotta stick to one side of this thing here. Either you believe in law enforcement or you believe in vigilante justice. Because what those individuals who traveled to Kenosha were doing was vigilante justice. And he said not everybody was armed with AR-15s. Some of them were. Other people brought bats and axes, melee kind of weaponry for like brawls, street brawls. So what I critically assessed about that whole thing was a group of mostly, probably all white men, middle-aged to older white men, brought weapons to a community that they had never, well, been to or lived in or had any property within to, well, fight and maim and murder other people. That's the only thing you could get out of that. I mean, they said, they asked, how are you going to, well, prevent people from, well, causing property destruction? And, well, the gentleman, Ryan Boach, with an AR-15 strapped to his shoulder, he said he was just going to tell him to stop. But that doesn't make a lot of sense, because why would you need to bring, well, weaponry to tell somebody to stop? No. Make no mistake. The intent that all of those individuals who traveled to Kenosha on that day, August 25th, 2020, was to do bodily harm to Black Lives Matter protesters. You see, they were working under the assumption, I've never seen the ad, but I would assume the ad mentioned things about rioters and looters and domestic terrorists. You know why I assume that? Because those are things that, well, was happening and being called by far-right activists online. You know, everybody that was associated with Black Lives Matter protests was a domestic terrorist. Even if you just came outside with your kids and held a sign that says Black Lives Matter, which 99.9% of the protesters did. Most protests last year were peaceful. But, well, if you had a certain political persuasion, you weren't inclined to, well, actually go and do your own research. And what your own research would have been is, well, you actually attend the protest without weapons. And, well, you actually see what the people were actually saying. You go and listen to the community. That's what research really is. Not, well, you reading something on Facebook or Twitter and then, well, grabbing your weapons. Deadly weapons at that. All types of, well, gear. Critical observation. The next critical observation, well, it's kind of the overall people in the whole scene that you see. A lot of the people, for the most part, are white men. Now, this happened in Kenosha as a result of, well, a police officer shooting an unarmed young black man in the back 7 times, Jacob Blake. And the protests that resulted were Black Lives Matter protests. But yet the courtroom is pretty much all white. I'm not sure if anybody else noticed that, but that's a critical observation. The protest wouldn't have happened without, well, there being some type of racial connotation to this. police in Kenosha having a history of, well, mistreating the black community. And for the courtroom in this trial to be, well, all white, or that's exactly what we're seeing. We haven't seen who the jury is, so we don't know. But it kind of doesn't jive with, well, what's actually happening in Kenosha, then and now. It's kind of looking at something that's not real, but it is real, you know. So that's a critical observation. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying it's the thing that is. And it would be disfair not to bring it up. My third observation, critical in nature, is that the judge, regardless of whether you think the judge is biased in the defense's side or, well, just sleepy all the time and wanting to take breaks, I think one thing that we can probably all come to a consensus on is, well, the judge after this case should retire. I mean, come on. We're all now seeing inside the courtrooms that, well, all of these judges, they're boomers, well up in age. They're white. And, well, they don't kind of have any way of relating to, well, our modern culture and society. So, why are they still judging over us? They're not reflective of, well, where we are as a society. Judge Brian Stroger should definitely retire after this trial. I'm sorry, it's pretty bad. From, well, giving the defense, rephrasing how they should phrase their question, to just clearly not remembering what he stated previously prior to stating something else, to, well, let's take a break every time. Well, it seems like every 5 seconds. That's my third observation. The judge clearly should retire. And I do get a sense of bias that this judge has. I believe he's on cold. And I definitely think that he's biased in favor of Cal Rittenhouse. You know, you can tell. There's some telltale signs there for sure. The fourth observation as well, the case itself, it's kind of a slam dunk. It's kind of not even a case. Now, I have my own opinion. I most certainly think Cal Rittenhouse is, well, guilty of, well, everything that he's been charged with, and should probably spend the rest of his life in prison for murdering 2 people. Now, that wouldn't be controversial if politics hadn't come into the equation, because people are now looking at the details and facts of what actually occurred. They're, well, in the political landscape of, well, Cal Rittenhouse is a hero. And you know, Rittenhouse or Rottenhouse is, well, branding himself or rebranding himself very well. But, well, if anybody had done that at another venue and you were there, you probably would have done what Anthony Hubert did. And you probably would have done what, well, Joseph Rosenbaum did. But because everything is so politicized nowadays, people are not thinking, well, reasonably. Let me explain. We learned already that, well, there was no gas station being set on fire. You know, conservatives told a whole lot of lies last year about what was happening at Black Lives Matter protests. They edited video footage to show, well, their white supremacist supporters things that were not occurring at Black Lives Matter protests. And they went on their websites and web pages and, you know, journalistic feeds and, well, stated things that just weren't true. And one of the big things was, well, there was a gas station on fire and there was chaos and pandemonium. Now that we've seen the footage, I'm sorry, worse stuff happens outside of, well, a grunge concert than that shit. You're telling me a garbage can was pulled from the car lot and put on the street and somebody lit the garbage can? Shit happens like that every night here in this city. People do that to stay warm. They light fires, well, near their cars because they don't have any more gas to turn on the car to keep themselves warm when they're sleeping in their car. This is bullshit. People were camping out. Sounds like a camp out. Ryan Bosch testified that they didn't have shit to do the whole night. They were standing there, mostly talking, for hours. And, well, when somebody came and, well, retrieved them and told them something was happening on this street, they would just run off with their guns to a different street. If you really want that kind of bullshit in the United States of America, because you're hell-bent on fighting a civil war, you're going to have to find a lot of dog walkers to walk your dogs. Because I don't know on what planet you think you can walk your dogs during the middle of a fucking civil war. Sometimes you have to be blunt with dumb people. Anyway, there was nothing to do. There was no riots. There was no huge amount of upheaval in Kenosha, you know, like people believed it was. The same people that say they don't believe the media are the same people that watch the media and say they don't believe the media. Facebook, you literally travel to another location because of a Facebook ad, but yet you don't trust the media nor Facebook. Okay, make that make sense. You know, there was no riot. There were people that were upset and protesting. And then they were agitated by more people who came, showed up out of nowhere with weaponry. Now, I'm not sure about you, but if you come to a protest and thus far nobody has gotten hurt, there's been no fights. You know, some schools you go to, and well, if two groups come in at the same time, there's fisticuffs and brawls. So administrators and school staff have to keep students separated. There wasn't even any of that shit at the protests. People were walking and chanting down the street. And well, what would you think if, well, a bunch of middle-aged white men who you've never seen before hop out of vehicles, armed to the teeth, like they're in Iraq or Afghanistan, and start, well, just walking down the street, pointing their weapons at you? Now, we've also established that Joseph Rosenbaum just had, well, returned from a mental health hospital where he had taken his medication. But you're dealing with somebody who's unhoused. Now, most of these fuckers who came down there to Kenosha don't know anybody who's unhoused. But me, the Purple People's House, we've actually worked with thousands. I would say I've worked with thousands of people who are unhoused. And they suffer from a lot of different types of mental health, mental illnesses, which comes with, well, having to live in the condition of being unhoused. It's not necessarily, well, the most pretty condition that a human can find himself in. Shelter is a basic need and a human right. And just because you fuckers have gone along with any bullshit the capitalists have were shoved down your ass doesn't mean the rest of us have. So let's get that notion correct. Anyway, you just get out of a mental health hospital and you happen to be walking downtown. You haven't been in Kenosha for a while. And well, you happen to go down to a protest. You're probably, well, trying to figure out what's going on. There's a lot going on and happening. But for the most part, you're acting as normal as you usually would do on a regular night in any major city. And here come people pointing guns at you. You think that's not triggering? You fuckers are triggered when somebody calls you a name online. Try having grown men point guns at you who you've never seen or met before. They want to try to act like Joseph Rosenbaum was the aggressor. No. A person pointing a gun at me that I've never met before is automatically an aggressor. Cal Rittenhouse shouldn't have been there, nor should Ryan Bulge have been there, nor should any of those men have been there. They had no business or no reason to be there. Yet they made up bullshit reasons in the courtroom. Things that didn't even sound plausible to a reasonable person. Your intention was, well, to be intimidating. Wait a minute. What's intimidating about a white man carrying a gun? Are you saying we're supposed to just be scared of you because you're a white man carrying a gun? In the year 2020? What the fuck is wrong with people nowadays? See, this bullshit is why the country is in the shape that it's in. People don't want to examine the reason why things are happening. They want to fault and blame other people, but they don't want to examine their role in this bullshit. And everybody has a role in this bullshit. Make no mistake about that. So, I'm not going to blame a victim, Joseph Rosenbaum, an unarmed victim. We know now he was completely unarmed. Ryan Bulge lied to the FBI. We learned that too. He told the FBI the contents in the bag were, well, Molotov cocktail contents. Things that, well, ingredients that you would need to make a Molotov cocktail. But then, well, he ended up testifying that, well, he looked in the bag because there was video footage of him looking in the bag. And the bag was, well, empty. There were no contents in the bag for the most part. It was see-through. So, if there was Molotov cocktail ingredients, we would have saw it on the video. So he straight up fucking lied to the FBI. McGinnis, the journalist for the Daily Caller, or as I like to say, the Daily Shitter. It's a conservative publication that does nothing but lie. Because, well, they employ people like McGinnis who testified and tried to change his testimony. Boy, was he a slime ball. Slimy Pete. Couldn't keep his hands together. You couldn't keep it. It's like greasy. Did you see it? Slicker than the fawn's hair. A snake. Wait a minute. Falling forward and lunging. They're synonymous with each other. You say, I definitely know for sure he was reaching for, well, the barrel of the weapon. I know that for sure. Although, Rosenbaum never said what he was doing. Now keep in mind, Rosenbaum, we learned, is 5'3". Rosenbaum is very short. And he's not wearing any shirt. He's shirtless, with shorts. So you can see that Rosenbaum doesn't have any weapons on him. And Cal Rottenhouse is 5'8" with an AR-15. And a 5'3" individual diving, falling forward, lunging forward, reaching but missing the barrel of a gun. And well, you as a 5'8" individual, when a 5'3" individual is falling forward, you decide that, well, you're in fear for your life so much that you shoot the person 4 times. The fatal shot in the back, killing them. And all of these incel Nazis that are online, you know, the toxic masculinity crowd, you've seen them. They've left comments on my page. They've increasingly started to come over here now. Look, I don't fuck with Nazis. I don't even play. The moment you leave that trash on my page, I delete it. I don't want it. Go elsewhere. There's plenty of other spaces for scum like that. Anyway, you can't tell me that that's justified. That's self-defense. The person's unarmed. They're 5'3" and they're falling forward. Meaning they're fixing to hit the ground and you shoot them 4 times. The final shot in the back. No, that's not self-defense. That's murder. And the rest of the crowd saw that shit. The people who were walking towards that. And Anthony Hubert, he started running towards him with his skateboard and hit him with his skateboard. Now, if you saw an active shooter just murder somebody, you're probably going to chase after the shooter too, because you don't know if he's going to, well, start shooting and murdering more people, like what commonly happens in the United States of America. But, well, apparently, according to the incel Nazi crowd online, you know, Anthony Hubert, well, he shouldn't have done that. Now, we've heard story after story since the reopening of people coming into grocery stores and nightclubs just shooting people. Mass shootings. But you're not supposed to try to stop an active shooter. And according to, well, the incel Nazi crowd, murdering one person doesn't make you an active shooter. You have to stand there and wait to be shot. 2 people have to be shot and murdered before it becomes an active shooter. It's people's, plural, according to those bastards. Stupidity. Stupidity. No. No. Anthony Hubert is a hero for trying to stop him. Tragically, he lost his life. Cal Rittenhouse, well, he's a murderer and plus a liar. You know, he's on tape saying that, well, he's 19 and he's a medic. Even though Ryan Bulge figured that he wasn't 19. They knew he was too young. That's why Ryan Bulge, well, testified that he should have been watching it. He should have been with him. And, well, he was supposed to be his bodyguard the whole night. But somehow they got separated. So you got a minor with an illegal weapon transported across state lines. And he's lied about his age and his certification. Remember, he's supposed to be operating as a medic. Now, I don't know how many medics you know that walk around with AR-15s and shooting people and then not rendering any medical services. But that's exactly what Cal Rittenhouse did on August 25th, 2020. And because, well, he's got a conservative cult-like following, just like their cult leader. Because apparently he was at one of their cult rallies in the front row. Yeah, Cal Rittenhouse went to a Donald Trump rally. Front row. He was a huge fan. So when Donald Trump was spewing out all of that bullshit about going to places and taking care of domestic terrorists, you know, people were actually listening. But names back then, they were funny. It was cool to call people names. Now if you say the sour cream brigade, or you say a mayonnaise roach, Oh no, you're being racist towards us. Bullshit. You got 4 years of a lunatic who did nothing but tweet out name calling and racial animus and bigotry non-stop. And they didn't say anything. In fact, they found it humorous and laughed about it. But I always say, it's no fun when the shoe is on the other foot. No. No fun when the rabbit's got the gun. What goes around comes around. We all know this, or we should. He didn't touch the barrel of the gun. That's been confirmed. All that McGinnis stuff. Oh well. He might not have, touched it, but he was reaching for it. That's speculation. McGinnis doesn't know what's in Joseph Rosenbaum's mind. There's no way he could know that. No, what he does know is he lunged and he was falling forward, what he told Tucker Carlson, and then tried to slime his way out of it on the stand. Tried to mince words. Tried to act like, something that doesn't exist exists. Like a bit of a dead end. What the fuck is a bit of a dead end? Either something's a dead end or it's not a dead end. And then when the video is played and it shows, the car lot being wide open. There's no walls. There's no dead end anywhere. You can run this way. You can run that way. You can run this way. You can run this way. There was no dead end. He says it's a bit of a dead end. Fork-tongued snakes. And that's who's employed at the Daily Caller. So just know when you read that shit, they're the liars. They call everybody else liars. But they're the liars. A bit of a dead end. The fuck is a bit of a dead end? Cal Rittenhouse did that. He swung around. He missed. He dodged. He dodged the lunge. So he could have ran off. No. Instead, he decided to murder a human being. He ought to pay for that. And that's not a conservative issue or a liberal issue. It's an issue of where you want to be as a society. Because I guarantee you, whatever you justify for one individual to happen, it can be justified for you, for it to occur to you as well. Or maybe not to you, but someone you know, or family, relative, friend. Careful what you start justifying out there. I don't know how that became political. Because, it's inhumane. And then you have an AR-15 and you're fighting somebody with a skateboard. I'm sorry. If you're this trained individual with a weapon and you know what you're doing and you're responsible in your mind, somebody with a skateboard and you have an AR-15, they probably don't need to be murdered. You probably can just wound that person, shoot them in the leg, shoot them in the foot. Even if you wanted to just shoot, you might not even have to shoot. You might just have to point and say, I'm going to shoot you. And they probably wouldn't move forward anymore because they just saw you shoot someone else. Both murders are murders. And both Joseph Rosenbaum and Anthony Huber are victims. And I made notation in a post about that. And I had 3 of these info Nazis Apparently there's groups of them all online. Anybody that says anything about their dear lover boy, Kyle Rittenhouse, their proud racist boy, their proud Christian boy, they go around and they troll people. I'm not the owl to be trolled. Don't fuck with me. I tell you this all the time, but sometimes you need to reiterate it to new people who don't know. Don't fuck with me. Go fuck with someone else. I don't fucking play. Especially on shit like this. This is serious. This is not something that you get to vote on. You don't get to vote on, whether it's okay to murder people or not because you dislike them. It's not how we work. We have a system here. Now, if you don't like the system, we can start advocating and doing what you want us to do too. Because two can play at that game. Remember, I told you, you didn't like it when people were, you enjoyed it when Donald Trump was doing all the name calling. But now that you're getting names, it's not so fun. Two can play at that whole, let's go out on a joyride with weapons. Because I guarantee you, in a country of 333 million people, everybody's got weapons. You don't want, what was that? Kick-ass. You don't want kick-ass bullshit happening on your local streets. You don't want people just showing up with weapons walking down the street, pointing them at random people. And in Kyle Rittenhouse case, utilizing them on people. You don't want that bullshit on your street. That's a recipe for disaster this winter. You already are dealing with the Delta variant. You don't want more bullshit on top of it. And that will be some real bullshit. You think you won't be inconvenienced by that bullshit. You most certainly will. It's called martial law. Because they won't allow you to do that bullshit for very long. Now, this case will set a lot of precedent. If Rottenhouse gets off, it's going to be open season and pretty bad. If he's actually held accountable for his actions, maybe it really will be somewhat of a deterrent. It won't stop everything, but people will know that they just, can't do whatever the fuck they want to do. Like the gentleman in Idaho who asked the question, when do we get to use the guns? See, this is why people have always believed in gun control. You said you had the guns to, do target practice and, to have recreational fun out in the woods. But now you're asking policymakers, when do you get to use the gun on your own fellow, citizens? Even if you don't view people as citizens, they are still citizens. Just because you don't like them or you don't agree with them doesn't mean that they are any less of a citizen. I don't like and agree with your views either, but you're still, my fellow citizen. Even though I don't respect you anymore, because respect is earned. It goes both ways. If you want to use a weapon on me because you disagree with me ideology-wise, I have a right to defend myself against you. Just remember that. There's millions of people who don't agree with you, just like there's millions of people who do agree with you. We have to come to a consensus to, resolve our differences a different way than to just, clobber each other like it's the Flintstones. But, if we want to go back to that time when we did do that, you got to brush up on, some old things, like gangs of New York. There's a lot of people that still owe us favors. Make note. And don't ever make any mistakes about it. Now, we'll continue with day 5 of the trial. I'll continue observing and watching. But hopefully justice is served for Joseph Rosenbaum and Anthony Hubert. That should have never happened. And people can try to politicize it all they want. They're full of bullshit when they're doing that. Just know. And that's another critical observation in my last. Anybody who's trying to justify this, trying to say, well, he had a right to do it, it's self-defense, and they would have done it too. Those are the people that you really got to look at side-eye. Like, oh, this kind of mentality is here. And it's a lot of it in this country, you know. And well, it's going to result in some bad things happening. Because, well, it's too much toxicity, too much violence in nature. You didn't know what was happening in Kenosha, yet people chose to bring weapons. They didn't choose to come, well, with an open mind. Their mind was already made up. Maybe because, well, it said Black Lives Matter. Just like people are showing up at school board meetings and county meetings. Maybe because it says race and critical race theory. Let's be honest. Assumptions that, well, there's something menacing coming down the road. They're always made by, well, white citizens in this country when race and, well, black is mentioned. And we have to ask ourselves why that's the case. Maybe perhaps this trial that you're all watching, the Rottenhouse trial, maybe you'll get some answers. You gotta open up your ears. Watch closely. You might learn a few things or two.